It was epic. It totally changed the course of my life. The person that I was before having my girls does not exist.
No.
In any facet.
Yeah.
I was broken down and then had to be rebuilt back up. I had to rebuild myself from scratch. I mean, with the bed rest, I couldn't even walk.
Yeah.
So physically, emotionally, I just had to rebuild.
Welcome back to No Place Like Home. I am Larissa and I'm here with Jess.
Hello.
And today we are joined by Dr. Nicole Gale. We are so excited to have you here with us, Dr. Nicole. Can I call you Dr. Nicole?
No, please just call me Nicole. Thank you. I'm excited to be here and chat. Please call me Nicole.
My acupuncturist is also, well, I call her Dr. Nick. But
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Nice Simpsons reference.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't watch The Simpsons. See, that flew over my head. Don't know.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Dr. Nick. Surely you know that just from like...
No.
No.
It's lost on me. Sorry, guys. Anyway.
We digress.
We digress. Nicole, tell us about how many children do you have?
I have 3 children. So
Right.
I'm a mum to twins who are 10, non-identical girls, and then I have a third daughter as well who is 7. So they're almost turning 11 and 8.
Right.
I had 3 children in 3 years, and their birthdays are all within 2 weeks of each other in January.
Oh,
Yep.
wow.
So it's pretty intense in January in our household. But yes,
I
so
bet.
I've got three kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your training and qualifications, just for people that do not know you?
Yes, of course. So I am a GP by training, but I've worked in general practice for a long time, but I have a special interest in the perinatal space and in women's health. And I'm also a lactation consultant, and I practice a little known specialty of breastfeeding medicine, which relates to really the care of mothers and babies in relation to complex feeding issues where there might be the intersection with medical issues at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to talk more about that in our next episode. But let's spend this one getting to know you a bit more. Your births. So we actually haven't talked about multiple births on this podcast. So this will be our
Twins. First time round.
Yeah, 0 to 2.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was that?
It was quite intense, to be honest.
What was your... Okay, sorry. When you first found out you were having twins,
Yes.
shock?
Shock.
Yeah.
Yep.
Excitement?
Fear.
Were twins in your...
No twins in the family. No.
Really?
Yep.
And naturally
conceived. Yep. So it was a big shock. Yeah.
Meant to be shock.
I think it
big
was.
shock
I think it
nonetheless.
was a meant to be shock. I think I was really welcoming into the universe, and I was really keen, and I wanted to be a mum, and I knew I wanted more than one child, but I knew it would be. I don't know what the word is. I knew it would be a bit of a bumpy road, and it would be an intense shift and a big lifestyle change. So, so naturally conceived, bit of a shock and a roller coaster. And when I was thinking about today, talking about postpartum, really for me, it's very difficult to separate out the pregnancy and the birth from the postpartum. It feels like running all the way through. So I had quite an intense pregnancy, and I had a complicated pregnancy first time round with my girls. I had hyperemesis from early on, from about 5 weeks on the dot.
Really quickly, Nicole, for people that don't know what that is.
So it's hyperemesis gravidarum is a really severe form of nausea and vomiting of pregnancy, where you can lose weight and become quite dehydrated and be very debilitated.
So this was made famous by Princess Kate at the time.
I was pregnant with
Really?
at the same time as Princess Kate. Yes. Yep. So
There you
I remember
go.
being in hospital and it was all over the news.
You were
And
like,
so it was
me
topical.
too,
I'm like, me too.
Yeah.
Yes. It was nice to see it discussed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So very quickly after being pregnant, I didn't go along and I wasn't able to hide the pregnancy, which is sort of what people often do in the first trimester is, they try and continue on with their lives and work. And I think things have changed and are changing around disclosing that you're pregnant prior to 12 weeks. But I couldn't work basically and became
Were you
bedbound
working
and
as
very
a
sick.
GP?
I was working as a GP.
Oh my
Yep.
gosh, you can't imagine
Yeah.
trying
Yeah, I
to see
know.
patients all day
Yeah. It
with
was
hyperemesis.
pretty intense, yeah. So I had to take a few months off work. I did end up going back to working as a GP for some time, but then I ended up going on leave. I can't even remember, maybe 25 weeks. So relatively,
right.
relatively early compared to what people conceptualise, but there was just no way I could keep
Yeah.
working. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And it was the best thing I did because
good.
when I rested, the nausea was so much better. I was able to take care of myself. And I really needed to divert all my resources to myself at that point in time rather than externally caring for others. And so I was on leave, and then at 29 weeks pregnant, I went into preterm labour with my twins.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I ended up admitted to hospital at 29 weeks and sat in hospital on bed rest until 35 weeks for 6 weeks.
Oh, my goodness, Nicole.
Yeah, really intense. Yeah.
Wow.
So
How was that for you mentally? Like,
yeah, it was incredibly challenging
Yeah.
mentally. I was very big physically, so I was actually very uncomfortable physically.
Yeah.
And then mentally I just had to be in my bed in my room because I would have contractions if I was even put in a wheelchair and moved out of the room. So it feels a bit like Rear Window where you're stuck in bed,
Yeah.
sort of watching the world continue on while you hold on. And it was very traumatic. Yeah.
I would imagine so.
I think it wasn't until later on that I was really able to put together that was very difficult.
And process through
And
that.
process, yeah. Because I was incredibly isolated. I had some friends and family come in, but really I was in bed 24/7 with my babies, and it was just the three of us there for 6 weeks.
What did you do to
pass the time?
time?
Yeah. I
Did
was...
we have iPhones then? Yes. Thank goodness.
Yes.
It's not that.
I'm not-
I was
no.
thinking back because Louis the same age. And when I moved to Berlin, I didn't have an iPhone. So like 10 years ago, I didn't have an iPhone. But the twins aren't 10. They're about to turn.
How old are the
No,
twins?
they're 10. They're turning 11.
It's your young.
Yeah.
So
Oh, Valentina's turning 11. So January.
January.
Valentina's February the
There you go.
6th.
Very similar
There you
time.
go.
Yeah. So we would have been pregnant at the same time. Yep.
So we did have iPhones then. I just didn't have one. But
Yeah. There weren't podcasts though.
No.
There were no podcasts. So I listened to a lot of music.
Pass the time.
Yeah, music, and I was very tired, so I slept and I watched a lot of trashy TV. Also, I was on an antenatal ward with a number of other women who were pregnant and had to be hospitalised, and it was usually threatened labour, early losses, and they actually ran counselling sessions with the most beautiful counsellor where they would find they had a giant room on the ward, and because everyone couldn't get out of bed, they would wheel the beds into the room, and we would have these sessions with women who we'd never met before, never met each other. So we couldn't actually visit each other's rooms, but there was Facebook. And so
Have
we
you
would
stayed in touch with any of them?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Wow.
So luckily the ones, the families that I was in hospital with, they all had very good outcomes and their babies.
Oh, good.
Yeah, are well
beautiful
and doing
things
really well.
do come from some really hard,
Yep.
shitty things.
It was one of the most powerful and honest experiences of my entire life was sitting in that room with those women where everyone was just so raw and concerned, you know, about what was going to happen and was their baby going to be okay.
Were they all first-time mums? Do you remember?
They happened to be, yes, but not all of them
so
were.
You're all in the same boat of, I'm going to have to try not to cry, but, you know, first-time mum.
Yeah.
No idea what is going on or what the outcome's going to be.
And
How
the focus
terrifying.
was just hoping that the babies would survive, to be honest.
Yeah.
Not even thinking of postpartum, not even having that on the radar. If you're thinking, am I going to be able to take my baby home?
Yeah.
You know, it's just a very different lens. Your mind doesn't even go to the beyond. And every week I had the medical staff coming in and giving me pamphlets about what the complications for my babies would be in terms of,
like if they're born now.
if they were born now, what medical complications might happen, what the risk of death is. And they would hand me a sheet every week and come in. And it was really, I don't know, to consent. I don't know. It was difficult. It was really difficult. And it was not made easier by being a medical person. That's the thing also. Yeah. So I understood the system and how it worked, but it was still very challenging. Yeah. And so I think it's just luck. You know, I got to 35 weeks and the pre-labour or the labour I'd been having for 6 weeks just picked up. And, it was like, will the babies be in for another day? Will they be in for another week? But I was so over it.
I bet. Yeah.
I was so over it. I was 35 plus 4. I was huge. I couldn't really get to the toilet. My resting heart rate was like 110 to 120 in bed. Yeah. My body was like, I'm done. I think I'm done. And we had decided to have a Caesar because both of my girls were breech. And so twin breech, and the risks of a twin breech birth didn't feel for me it was the right decision to have a Caesar. But I had a lot of guilt about whether or not I was doing the right thing by saying, oh, the contractions are worse, I'm in labour, you know, take me to theatre, because there had been such debate about whether or not to take me to theatre earlier. And my obstetrician had actually said, oh, I'm getting a bit nervous, maybe we should deliver these babies a couple of weeks prior. And I had said, no, they're fine, stay in there. I had a deep knowing that they were actually okay. And I have no idea where it came from. They would do once to twice daily CTGs or monitoring of the babies every single day. And because there were 2, they'd squirm around, and so I'd be on the machine for hours. But I just had this deep knowing that they were okay. I just had to try and keep them in for as long as you could. As long as I could.
What an amazing job you did too, Nicole.
Thank you.
Like, that just kind of makes me a bit emotional.
I know.
Yeah, I just think that's so powerful.
It was the most difficult, one of the most difficult things I've ever done was being in that space.
And having to sit
and holding
still, not leave the bed.
And the uncertainty.
And just no control over anything
total
going
lack of
on.
control. Yeah.
And like that, sharing that energy with other women as well would have been consuming on top of what you were experiencing as well.
It was actually profoundly soothing, to be honest.
To share it.
Because when you can sit in space in real honesty with other women
who get it.
Yeah. And who are having a similar experience when you feel isolated.
Yeah.
I really think that's the power of sharing space, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And that was one of the introductions for me to what it's like to sit in space with women.
It is
and it's life-changing.
Most powerful thing that I've had a similar experience in a breathwork environment, not in a environment such as yours, but it was one of, like, it completely just shifted and changed my life, that session. in ceremony with like 20 other women. And I actually didn't know probably 17 of them, you know? Like, and they all just held me through this. Yeah. So amazing.
Yeah, it was really, and we kept that connection and support for each other afterwards as well. And everyone was all spread out, but they came at 35 plus 4. The Caesar was difficult because they had a lot of difficulty getting the spinal in. So I had 8 to 10 goes of the spinal because I couldn't lean forward. I had such a big belly. And then with that, babies were born, my girls were born, and then I dropped my blood pressure as well. So I did need a bit of support after the Caesar.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. I remember them being born, and I think the experience in hospital had been so difficult in some ways. I was removed. I wasn't in my body. I was a little bit disassociated from it. And I remember hearing my daughters cry and thinking that could be any baby's cry. How is that my baby? It could just be anyone's.
Right.
Yep.
Wow.
And thinking, oh, that's an interesting thought to have.
Yeah.
Of feeling so disconnected because when I really had no control and wasn't empowered by the circumstance, and so you're passive in that. Yeah. And they were born at good weight, so they were 2.5 kilos each. So
Well done.
lucky again.
Yeah.
And they went to the nursery, and I found that separation from them really difficult.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I can't imagine it. You know, they've been in you for all that time.
I agree.
And then to have them, I
Yeah.
can't imagine how that would feel.
Because what I did was I spent my time in bed talking to them and listening to music and thinking of us as the three of us there, and for them to then be gone and not have that contact. And now I understand, you know, with years of experience and work, of course that's going to be traumatic, but the visceral nature of that, how it's psychological, but it's so much more than that. There's something deep within your body that is just desperate,
Yearning for
it.
Yeah, your babies.
For your babies, yeah. So, and things like family members went to the nursery and saw them, and I wasn't there and met them because I was separated from them and I was in recovery and they'd been taken upstairs. And I remember the feeding was important to me. I wanted to try and I wasn't supported, so I had to ask to help with expression. I was told, oh no, don't worry about emptying your breasts at all. You can just start tomorrow. And I said, no, I actually that's not how it works. I need to start expressing colostrum.
Were you already working I know you were working as a GP.
I was working as a GP. I had the standard GP training and I had done some reading, but the resources out there were a lot less than they were now. And I felt very, I don't know, I did some books about how to breastfeed and twins. And it's like I say to families now, it's like trying to learn how to ride a bike from a written instruction set.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
It's kinesthetic learning. It's learning with doing. You can have education that can be really important to contextualize your experience, but it's that doing. Yeah. So I really wasn't particularly prepared. I remember in the morning desperately wanting to get to them and the nursing staff being just so busy that they couldn't even get me up post-Caesar. So I actually got myself up post-Caesar with everything and took a shower so that I could go and see the babies. I'm like, I just need to get to these.
Mama just wanted to get to her cubs.
And I I almost passed out in the shower, to be honest. But I was like, no.
We're doing this.
Yep.
Come on, body, work
to them.
with me.
I'm like, no, we've got to get to these girls. So, and then I was able to be up there and with them. And breastfeeding was it was not an empowering circumstance. I remember holding one of my girls and she was nuzzling at the breast, and the nurse telling me I was not allowed to breastfeed. She wasn't strong enough to breastfeed, and I would be harming her if I were to try. And I sat there with her for 20 minutes, half an hour, and she's nuzzling, and everything in me is just going, oh, I just want to take my bra down and just put her on the breast. And after a while I thought, well, I'll just do it without the nurse seeing.
Good on you.
So was just doing it without the nurse seeing. She was doing a good job, my Lucy, and the nurse came over and said to me, well, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it properly. And it has stuck with me, obviously, that line, for a long time. You know, I came into this system where I'm educated, I'm empowered, and at every step, and this was 10 years ago, but at every step of that, it was not.
There was no support.
There was no support.
Encouragement.
No. And so they were in hospital for 3 weeks.
Did you stay in for the 3 weeks?
No,
as well?
I got discharged. They sent me home. So then every day
you were
you'd
at
have
home without your baby.
Yeah, you'd have to leave your babies and go into hospital, but I couldn't drive because I'd had a Caesar. And that was very hard, leaving them in the hospital. I thought that would get easier, but it didn't. My husband was so happy to have me home. He was just so joyful because he'd just missed me and he'd been so worried.
Yeah.
And I just felt like a shell of myself. I felt like I was missing limbs. I couldn't be happy to be home.
2 humans.
He wanted me to reflect back to him, I'm happy to be with you.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the same experience for him. And what was holding it up was one of my daughters was just really sleepy, and she just was not feeding well at all with oral feeds, with a bottle or anything.
Right.
And I remember feeling just so devastated and frustrated and thinking, what can I do? What can I do to possibly help her wake up so we can get rid of the tube feeding that she was having? And I went, I know this, kangaroo care. So I went in and I just had her on me, on my chest, skin to skin, over and over again. And within 24 hours, she woke up completely and started taking feeds.
Amazing.
You're amazing.
And so the power of skin to skin, the power. It wasn't anything medical that woke her up. And you could say, oh, maybe it's time and maturity. No, it was not. It was the skin to skin. She was shut down, I think.
Yeah, she needed her mum just as much as you needed her.
Exactly.
Darling.
So then I was able to take them home, and that was obviously joyous, but it was a huge shock to the system.
I bet.
So
Because I
now we're
imagine you
into
had no
postpartum.
time to plan for your postpartum, right?
Yeah, no.
And also,
No,
again,
we didn't have the onesies that were in the, 6-0,
all
the
of that.
tiny, any
Yeah.
of that stuff.
And
no.
just the practical things, like no time to fill your freezer. You've been in hospital.
No. And it wasn't there wasn't as
wasn't.
much support.
No.
It was really very different 10 years ago. The idea of doula and postpartum support. I knew the word postpartum, but that was only because I was medical. But there was nothing. It felt like, you're discharged
agree.
and you fall off a cliff.
Yes.
And the 2 girls had some medical problems and were very unsettled babies. And so after they went home, that was a whole new phase. And you're going into that phase, really what you want to be doing is nourished, held, supported, feeling good. I understand that now. And I was already just, a wreck, really, to be honest. I then got very severe mastitis that landed me back in hospital. I had blood poisoning with mastitis. Yep. I was really sick.
You really just copped the gamut.
I've really,
you, Nicole?
We're only at 4 to 6 weeks postpartum here. Yeah, I had a really intense postpartum. And then the girls were very unsettled babies with reflux and food issues. I had every breastfeeding issue under the sun, and mixed fed and breastfed and tried, and then unsurprisingly ended up with postpartum depression and anxiety, which, to be fair, I think was really antenatal, was when I was in hospital. I think that's when it started.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I was just so focused. And that was incredibly difficult. And I ended up going to a mother-baby unit and being admitted because I just really wasn't well. So I had a psychiatric admission for 3 weeks. Yep.
With the
girls,
babies.
with the babies.
Yeah.
And I was somewhat validated in that they would normally have nursing staff that would be the same every day. But after 2 hours with the girls, they came in and said, we're going to have to rotate the nursing staff. They're so unsettled.
Wow.
We actually just, the staff, they're such high needs babies. And they said, how did you cope with this for so long?
Wow.
I was like, oh, so validated by that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But to get to that point, I don't even have a lot of memory of that time.
It's interesting. I agree with you. I don't have a lot. People can talk about some things in those early stages with Valentina and I'm like, no. Yeah. I don't remember it.
Yeah. Or like world events even. Years later things will happen and people will say, oh, this happened, and I'll realise, oh, it was in that period of time. Just
Oh yeah, I feel that too. And I had an easy time, but I know that you're so focused on
100%
your babies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I remember being in hospital again was traumatic again.
Did it help though? Like was it a
Yeah, I mean, I needed it.
Yeah.
I was not okay in the community. And it allowed me to have some sleep and have some safe space where there were extra set of hands because there were no other set of hands.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking a couple of weeks in that the only way I was going to get out was to convince them that I was well enough to get out. As my family were all very concerned about me. And just being able to be more interactive and take care of yourself and that kind of thing. And so when I went home, I wasn't myself. I didn't feel 100%, but I was so much better. But I was obviously well enough that I went, I want to get out of here.
Now.
Yeah, I need to be home. And then after then, we slowly found our feet.
Yeah.
Slowly. It took us a long time as a family, and so it was quite traumatic for my husband too, really,
of course.
to have seen all that happen and be so helpless as well through the process. So coming today, I felt very grateful to be able to come and share my story and use my voice around that because I actually haven't had that experience. I haven't been able to do.
I knew that you had twins and another child, but I didn't know this.
Oh,
this is epic.
It was epic. It totally changed the course of my life. The person that I was before having my girls does not exist.
No.
In any facet.
Yeah.
I was broken down and then had to be rebuilt back up. I had to rebuild myself from scratch. I mean, with the bed rest, I couldn't even walk.
Yeah.
So physically, emotionally, I just had to rebuild. And I don't, with so much love for that previous person, but in my life, it's really interesting. Even I've had another daughter since then, and we had a different postpartum experience with her. I had a different experience, but there is before my twins, before Lucy and Beth, and then after. It's just so stark.
What do you think got you through
that time?
Yeah.
My girls needed me. Yeah.
I know, don't.
Yeah. My girls needed me.
Love. So it was love that got you through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They needed their mum. I knew that. I felt replaceable having been so, their postpartum being so medicalised. I sort of felt like, well, anyone can give them a bottle and anyone can give them a cuddle and that kind of thing. So how would they know me? But I knew that not having a mother would be, I didn't want that for them. Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't want that for them. So love for them and just put one foot forward. It's been a long time. I feel like it's taken me a really long time to process it, but I feel like it needed to happen. I feel like there was I had a difficult childhood, and I think it was in part that experience compounded trauma that I'd had previously, and I needed to be broken down and then rebuilt.
There's that beautiful quote by January Harsh where she says postpartum, it's the gist of it is that it breaks you and then you put back together as the person you're meant to be.
Yeah.
Becoming a mother does that to you. And I mean, this is testament to that.
Yeah, 100%. And I wouldn't wish the experience upon anyone, but I'm grateful for what I've been able to take from that. And I didn't recognise the person that I was postpartum for a really long time. But I was reflecting on this the other day, thinking about coming and talking to you and thinking, I like that person. I know that person now. That person feels familiar. So you can go from really having nothing that you feel like you can touch that is recognisable to you, and you can come back from that and you can rebuild. It just takes a lot of time and patience. And what I did was I baby wore my girls a lot. I went back to the skin to skin. I got into carriers and slings and
both at the same time. Like
I did
both front, one
I
back?
did a combination. I did all of the above. So I did I wore them both at the same time, and I wore one at a time. And they're both very different in personality. So one of my girls is like, I just want to see, and she's like, great, but she didn't want to be cuddled. She wanted to be picked up to be moved to the light switch so she could play with it, that kind of thing. Whereas my other daughter's really cuddly, and she loved that. And that, it sounds like a simple tool, but it was so healing because I think it soothed our nervous systems.
Yes.
That physical contact.
Like co-regulating each other
the
whole time.
Feeling like your babies have been taken away from you, and then, no, they're right here.
Yeah.
They're right here with me. So apart from the logistics of baby wearing, I actually think it's a profound tool for healing in the right context too. Focusing on that attachment and finding your feet and your confidence at home. So that was they're my twins. And I it's hard, isn't it? Because sometimes these horrible or these difficult stories, you know, what's the purpose of sharing them? You know, is it productive sometimes? You know, the audience, I'm quite mindful, and that's probably just why you haven't heard it, is that I'm mindful telling a story which is sort of quite traumatic and one thing after the other. You know, what's the benefit in that? But I think it is powerful for people. I hope it's powerful for people to hear that everyone can have different experiences and then see something reflected back in that they're not alone, really. Yeah. So having the girls, but they're my greatest teachers. You know, the most powerful impetus for growth. And so I actually have incredible gratitude to them because they've helped me become the person that, you know, I wanted to be. And so I'm mindful that my postpartum story, the further you get along, it becomes not just your story, it becomes their story too.
Yes.
But we got through it, the three of us, and they're so resilient and incredible strength and joy. And so the highlights, the highs and the lows. Yeah.
So coming from that experience, Nicole, then you had another child.
Yeah, I did. I had another daughter 3 years later. I was extremely nervous about the prospect of having another child and what that would mean and having a similar experience again. I did have hyperemesis again with her pregnancy, and so then I had 2-year-old twins.
Did you feel like when that happened, did you feel like, oh my God, this is starting all over again?
Yeah, it was really triggering, but I was very mindful that in being well and having a different outcome that I needed to be very proactive about my well-being. And I'd been through the hyperemesis before, so I knew how to be proactive with that. But I was also very proactive. I had counselling and psychology all through my pregnancy intentionally, even if I felt well, because I knew that what I needed to do was clear a lot of what had happened so that I was not bringing it into the next birth of this next child. It's not, it's not her fault what has come before, and I want that to be joyous for her. And that was incredibly helpful. Yeah. So I was sick through that pregnancy, and it was difficult, but it wasn't the same. I was very worried about going into labour again.
Yeah.
Everyone said, it was twins, you'll be fine.
Yeah, but you've still got that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, at 35 weeks, I rolled over in bed in the morning and my waters broke, 35 plus 0, so even earlier than the twins.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was full on, because I went, okay, we're having another early baby, even earlier.
Wow.
Yep. And I was planning a VBAC as well. I really wanted to try and have a vaginal birth, and my obstetrician, who was the same obstetrician, was very supportive of that. And so went into the hospital, started having contractions. And in fairness, I wonder if 35 weeks for me is just sort of the time. The night before, I remember being on the fit ball and rolling backwards and forwards and crying to my husband saying, I'm 35 weeks, I'm huge, I don't know how much longer I can do this.
Ooh. Wow.
So I think it was all happening, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The midwives when she was born, they didn't believe that she was a 35 weeker. They thought I'd got the dates wrong, but I'd had an early scan to see if there were twins. And so the dates were right. But yeah, so went into labour, and then ended up having a Caesar because it was possible that I had an infection in my waters. When I was in hospital, I had fevers, even though I didn't feel feverish. And this was my medical background, that sometimes if there's an infection in waters and there's a well baby, the complications with that can be pretty devastating. And so I had seen things through my training, and the obstetrician did not push me in any particular direction. He said, you can keep labouring, of course, but I just knew no. I just wanted her out and safe. And so I feel like I made the right decision for me for both of my births in terms of how they arrived. But I had this outpouring of grief after I'd made that decision. I just cried and cried because it just was not quite what I expected. But she came out and she was 3 kilos and she was well and she was happy and she was a normal baby, and they really wanted with the hospital to have protocol about her being in the nursery and all of these things. And I was a bit more vocal this time. I was a very different person and wise to the system as well. And so really we didn't have much separation at all.
Good.
And I had her on my chest and I just fed when she wanted to feed, and we co-slept in the hospital bed, even though the nurses would come in every shift and say, you need to put her somewhere else. And I would say, okay, yeah, sure.
No, she's not going anywhere.
Were you a rebel? Was there a little bit of a rebel in you before the twins? Or do you feel like that whole experience just like got rid of the good girl and you're like...
No, there was a rebel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're nodding at me. Yeah. Very pushed down, very much the good girl. But I just went, no, I'm going to have a different experience. And so I was able to have second time around a really positive and actually what turned out to be incredibly healing experience.
Oh, good.
So I'm so grateful to her. She healed she really did. She healed the first time round. And you know, we think back sometimes, I don't know, you think back of what are these times in your lives that sit deep down in your heart. And one of the places that I go to if I need to think of a happy place is actually being in bed with her, co-sleeping, her in my arm. It's summer, the window's open, it's the middle of the night and it's quiet. And the joy, it just sits with me. Yeah.
I'm so happy that you got your healing postpartum.
Yeah. I had a very different experience second time round. So, yeah, sorry, there's a lot in that.
Oh, no, never
Do
apologise.
not apologise.
We're here for all of it.
I think in a really strange way, it's kind of refreshing to hear all facets of it, because there will be people listening to this that have either, you know, experienced similar or a little bit of the same. You know, it's a bit of everything in between, because no one has the same experience and we all feel things differently. But I think I'm just taken by the strength of you. Like, for me, that just hits me in the heart.
And also, you know, if anyone listens to this and then goes on to have a similar experience to you, they might know that they can advocate for themselves that little bit more. And like what you did with your daughter, the kangaroo care straight away, rather than listening to these people that don't always know what's right for you and your baby. Yeah. Or babies in this case.
Yeah. I'm grateful to the experience, because I think being able to sit in those darker spaces, I feel comfortable being able to do that with women. Yeah. And without that, and you need the darkness to give you the shade and the light of life. You need all facets of life. Yeah. And that was just, I feel like that was my journey of what it was meant to be, as hard as it was. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Well, thank you for letting me share.
We are going to talk about, in our next episode, we're going to talk about how this entire experience informed your career.
Yes.
And the exciting things that you have on the horizon for some very lucky mums.
Great. Thank you.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guest speakers. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and content here should not be taken as medical or professional advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any personal recommendations and medical care. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate based on the best available information at the time of recording, we welcome any comments, suggestions or feedback via our website contact form, homb.com.au/contact. Names and details of personal experiences may have been changed to allow for anonymity and privacy. To join the conversation, join us on social media at Homb Postpartum.